It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley. As the second week begins, Gary, it's only been a week.
It feels wrong because these are all serious topics, and sometimes it feels wrong to be having so much fun.
Well, that's the thing is that when you observe it, it really is kind of that, oh my gosh, kind of laughter, where you're watching it going, I can't believe all this. The reaction on everything from the left, but also watching President Trump and watching his cabinet come together, watching everything, fall in place and watching him work and get things done. That's been very impressive.
Well, you did see that Scott Bessent now is the Treasury Secretary, and that means what the Democrats were fearful of, concentration camps for gays, has happened because he's gay and in the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Can you get closer to a concentration camp than that?
Right. I mean, Treasury Secretary. I mean, that's, saw the story from the Free Beacon, Alan sent to us, that he's the highest ranking public official, gay public official. And so over Mayor Pete.
Yes.
Because I guess if you look at Richard Grenell as acting director of national intelligence, that wasn't a permanent role.
It wasn't a cabinet position.
And it wasn't a cabinet position. Yeah. So, but I mean, we talked about it then. Of course, the liberal media ignores all that. Ted Cruz wins Iowa in 2016, and he's, the first Latino to do so. And if that was a liberal, if that was a Democrat, and Ted Cruz wasn't, didn't need to have anybody say that, but if it was a liberal, if it was a Democrat that had done that, they would have had a parade.
You need to stop talking. You know why? Because every time you talk, whatever I have in my mind to talk about for the next 10 minutes goes away, and there's so much going on. That did you see the Babylon Bee? That there was a headline. It was something like the media complaining because they can't keep up with all the stories.
Exactly. We kind of said that. It's like, wow, I guess we're going for a run, aren't we?
Well, let's get to this because I want to make sure we get to this because I wondered, you had, when I was playing these audio cuts, you said it was all over social media. And I said, well, that's what I was thinking because of the media pushing back on Trump and doing everything, whether it was the ABC affiliate in Chicago that's, as Homan said, outright lying about what's going on in the city of Chicago.
Right.
Or, the Democrats saying, this is just cruel and unusual punishment and this is horrible what's going on. And all of a sudden you saw yesterday, and they're all Trump surrogates, maybe not official, but it just was all over the place. All the Democrats, let me just play some audio cuts of what they were saying just a few years ago. Here is Obama.
If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half century.
That was everywhere yesterday on social media.
That was everywhere. This with Biden at the presidential debate in 2007. Here we go.
Would you allow these cities to ignore the federal law regarding the reporting of illegal immigrants and, in fact, provide sanctuary to these immigrants?
The reason the cities ignore the federal law is the fact that there is no funding at the federal level to provide for the kind of enforcement at the federal level you need. Pick up the New York Times today. There's a city not far across the river from my state that imposed similar sanctions. And what they found out is, as a consequence of that, their city went in the dumps, in the dumpster. Stores started closing. Everything started to happen. And they changed the policy. Part of the problem is you have to have a federal government that can enforce laws. This administration has been fundamentally derelict in not funding any of the requirements that are needed even to enforce the existing law.
So, Senator Biden, yes or no, would you allow the cities to ignore the federal law?
No.
There you go.
And this one, though, is really my favorite. This is, and here's this one. Here's the headline here: Bill Kristol, Anna Navarro from The View, and George Stephanopoulos are three people that will undoubtedly spend the next 4 years whining about Trump's cruel immigration policies. Here they are talking about it during the Obama presidency.
There you see President Obama in Denver this week. White House even has a hashtag for these outings. They call it "The Bear is Loose." With the president taking some heat for shooting pool, but not going to the border to see that crisis firsthand.
We send children back to Mexico. We send children back all over the world.
But they're not in those situations.
Well, they are in those situations, and things in Central America have been tough for a long time. But the idea that you're going to let unaccompanied minors just come into the U.S. because of a loophole in the 2008 law that allows you to send the Mexican kid back and the Honduran kid gets to stay. And that's not sensible. And so that the Republicans are going to propose this week on the Hill amending the 2008 law to have even treatment for everyone. And the president does have to send a message, you can't come here. And why is this happening? David talks about this has been a problem for decades. Why are these kids suddenly flooding this place? Because the president amnestied all the kids who were already here in 2012, and people in Central America decided. So the Republicans. Can I just say one thing? He just finished. He amnestied all the kids who are here, and every sensible person in Central America thought, hey, great, if I can get my kid into the U.S., there'll be an amnesty for him.
I think that's part of the problem for the president. If you go down to the border, part of his message has to be, you guys have got to go back home.
There is no such pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for these kids. So it is important for the president to clarify that the misrepresentation that's going on purpose by criminal forces in Central America is not so. That's why it would have been important for him to go to the border.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it really is. It's just complete chaos. And the reason is because, you know, you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow, right? We hear that throughout our lives. But when you are part of implementing the chaos as policy, when actual policy comes in, I mean, look at the contrast between Trump and Biden. I mean, he's been more active and more visible in front of cameras everywhere, on every front, on every issue, more in 1 week than Biden did in 4 years. And they don't know how to do that because they were part of, in 2020, they had the cover of COVID. And so he was disappearing all the time. He became president in 2021 and disappeared. The botched exit of Afghanistan. Couldn't be bothered to come home from. By gosh, Jack, what do you mean I've got to address the American people? Fine, then turns his back on the American people right after he says a few words. Then had to come back and do a sit-down interview because he botched that as well. And Trump is in the room. Did you see the story someone did? I thought at first it was the Babylon Bee, but it was a contrast between Trump and Biden. We already knew this, but in terms of talking to the media, and we've talked about this recently, but this was a news story from the weekend. I forget who did it. And Trump's up there at the podium talking away. And, of course, they show the back of Biden as he's walking away. And those are the difference. Those are the differences. That right there tells you what happens when you help to build something like this. And the liberal media, the liberal activist media, was part of building that facade around Biden. There was no government. We didn't know who was in charge. Turns out in the end, nobody knew who was in charge. And now we have somebody who's in charge, and they don't know what to do. You know, I keep saying the 1,000 screaming kids at a gymnasium. And it's like that, but it's like the teacher came in and now everybody's asking questions to each other going, well, what do we do? We haven't had a teacher in here in a long time. What do we do now? What do we do now? I mean, their Lord of the Flies is over. And Trump has the conch, at least for 4 years. And they don't know what to do with it.
Well, it's when we have said, because people live in the bubble of today, that all Democrats believed in what Trump is doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of them did.
Yep.
And you saw it right there. And
it,
then the beautiful one is Bill Kristol, Anna Navarro, and George Stephanopoulos.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the best. And Biden, yes.
We kind of, it's what's interesting. We touched on this yesterday. I think we've touched on it before. We talked about, look, this is where the left goes. They're ever changing. I mentioned recently the late Harry Reid when he was talking about building a barrier on the border and then tried to claim there were no illegal aliens working in construction in the state that he represented, Nevada. But this is over and over again. We've seen them go where they do this wherever the wind is blowing thing. We know what their real agenda is. By the way, we know what it has been all along. But I do believe the surrogates were in full force. I saw it some over the weekend, but yesterday, the audio that you just played from the video of Barack Obama talking about the border, that was everywhere. I know Elon Musk has been very active in posting stuff like that. We've been saying, look, the GOP needs to play them in their own words. It's why we love playing their audio cuts. We love playing them because it's so easy to defeat them. And they don't have anything on the issues, nothing on the issues. They really don't have anything left that is working.
Well, the thing about Republicans and the thing about Trump tells you, and conservatives tell you what they actually want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You normally don't see, and if a politician reverses what they believe, and we've hit Republicans that reverse what they believed, 10, 20 years ago, and we want an answer as to why did you change. But the entire Democratic Party has completely changed what they believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they got caught, as we know, when they got caught with the American people saying, no, we don't like this, well, they appointed Kamala Harris, who then came in and tried to lie to the American public that, no, we believe everything that Trump believes and we do a better job with what Trump wants to do than what Trump wants to do.
Yeah.
And it was just like, get out of town.
Right.
It was
so laughable.
There really is, you look at it, you go, well, what's your core belief? What do you actually believe besides holding power?
Right. Yeah.
What is it that drives you besides holding power? And what it comes down to is nothing except holding power.
That's it. That's it. And getting the win in however they do it. I mean,
but they're stuck now.
Yeah,
they're stuck. They're stuck with the issues.
Nothing
that
is
aren't
working.
That aren't winning issues. That isn't going to give them power.
Yeah.
They're stuck with it now.
Right.
When they finally realized it, it was like, oh, okay, we all support Kamala. Yeah. Rah, rah, yes. Yep, doggone right. She would. Trump was horrible on the border. Kamala Harris would actually close it. I mean, that was the first week of spots that came out. We're looking at each other like, nobody's going to buy this. And this is where we said, you can have all the money in the world.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if nobody believes your message or if nobody agrees with your message.
I was just about to say, speaking of money, I'm thinking of Lindy Lee, who clearly has crossed over now. And it's like there's been this. And we said, after the election, she was talking about, and this is somebody who was at the top in getting money together, bundling everything for the Democrats.
For the mega donors.
Yeah, for massive whales. And so I would love to get in into a time machine and go back to, I don't know, spring of 24 and just talk to her. Hey, how's it going? And then talk to her right at, let's say the end of the first week where Kamala Harris was anointed, her first weekend. Okay, where's it at? Tell me what's going on. I would love to have been a fly on the wall as to what Lindy Lee was seeing, if she had any concerns, because again, that's a machine. That's a real machine in getting these mega donors together, and they got them together, tens of millions of votes for Kamala Harris, based on nothing. Somebody's got to tell me how that happens.
Well, let's not over exaggerate it, because she simply went from bundling mega donors to MAGA donors.
Exactly.
It's only a one-letter change.
That's where she is, and it's I just would love to know where her mind was, what she was thinking. Was she questioning anything after that first week with Kamala Harris being on the ticket?
We've got a great show ahead. 866-90-RED-EYE.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Starting and charging system-related issues are one of the most common causes of winter breakdowns. So when your batteries talk, it's important you listen. Knowing the warning signs that could indicate your electrical system needs attention can help you avoid getting stuck out in the cold this winter. Dim lights are an early warning sign that your alternator is degrading and near the end of its life cycle. Lights that are brighter than normal, on the other hand, can indicate your alternator is overcharging. Get a full electrical system check if you notice your headlights getting dimmer or brighter.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. I'm telling you, it's just they have no arguments left. This is we could just sit here and play audio cuts all day.
Yeah.
It's like I don't have to think anymore. I just play. Okay, there's this, play this. This is CNN's Ashley Allison with Scott Jennings. And the look on his face is almost like she's setting herself up. Does she even know what she's doing here? Here we go. All right.
Everything, by your logic, if you apply it to the last administration, which I don't think is the case, then if Joe Biden wanted to go after Donald Trump because he wanted to go, the Attorney General should be able to do it, and there's no...
He did go after Donald Trump because Joe Biden didn't want to do it. He had
a special It really is like watching the electric football game.
Just going around in a
just
circle.
Turn it on. They just go in random directions. No, but he, and they wonder why nobody's watching.
You know who I really feel sad for worse than Buffalo Bills fans?
The guys at Newsbusters?
No.
Oh.
Liberal.
They have to watch it all.
Liberal Buffalo Bills fans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
They're not happy about anything.
No.
Right now. They're like,
no.
Nothing's going my way. Nothing's going my way.
I didn't think of that. Man, I haven't even reached out to my liberal friends since Election Day. That's my bad. I should do more for them because they're probably in chaos.
Any liberal acquaintance that I have, completely quiet. Completely quiet. No, I mean that's been the case so for a couple of years.
I had one friend from the guys from Del Rio that I still hang out with and keep in touch with on a regular basis. One of them had voted Democrat in the past. We had a conversation about. No. I'm totally on board. I'm voting for Trump. It was a sealed deal. Yeah.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app, available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. By the way, I know there seemed to be a lot of excitement from Republicans yesterday about Donald Trump saying that the income tax should go away completely, and just like we did in the 1800s all the way up till, was it 1919? 1917, forgot exactly when the income tax started, that we should fund everything with tariffs. Let me just get his exact quote here. Hang on one second. I'm trying to get the exact quote. Boy, I just want to get it because it's fascinating, because when we talk about economics, there are a lot of challenges if you ever wanted to fund the federal government through tariffs.
Right.
There'd be much to go. But basically what he was saying is that we were the richest we've ever been when we were using tariffs. I don't know where he gets that figure from, so I can't really comment on that. But what you have to understand is in 1900, the federal government spending was 2% of GDP. Now it's 24%. Federal government hardly did anything compared to what the federal government did today. It was easy to raise that kind of revenue.
Right.
Federal government now, per capita, take inflation, whatever, spends 12 times more. It's 12 times bigger. The other thing is, I did the calculation. Federal income tax from individuals, which includes people that are in business, 2.1 trillion raised in 2023. I tried to use 2024, but there were some distorted figures because you had imports into the country that you had people in the United States buying a ton more, loading up their inventory, expecting the tariffs were going to hit immediately.
Right,
so,
in the fourth quarter.
Right, so I took 2023 as the example. 2.1 trillion is what we raised in income taxes, and these are the challenges if you're going to use tariffs to fund it. If you had a 25% tariff across the board on everything that comes into the country, well, we imported 3.1 trillion, roughly, in 2023. So if it's a 25% tariff and it's the full value of those goods, you're talking $700 to $800 billion in revenue. Huge shortfall from the 2.1 trillion now. If you do what the president said he would do, which would be 40% on China and 10% on the rest of the world, you would raise roughly $500 billion, 1/4 what the federal income tax brings in right now based on the goods that we import. The other challenge is, what's the goal of imports? Or excuse me, what's the goal of a tariff? To lower imports.
Yeah, it's protectionism.
Right. It's to lower the amount of imports. So those figures would be a lot less if the manufacturing came from the United States. Now, the argument is, yeah, but people wouldn't have income taxes, and so they would be willing to pay higher prices. Half of wage earners don't pay any income tax.
Right.
They would feel those huge price increases. And in order to do that, and I saw that the new Treasury Secretary he didn't say tariffs, he said consumption tax would be needed. Well, then you would have consumption tax, you would have to have a sales tax and tariffs. Unless you were going to tariff, in order to get what you would need, it'd have to be across the board, 80 to 100% tariff? But then if you did that, you would see a decrease, massive decrease in the tax revenue that you could raise, because nobody's going to pay that
the behavior would change drastically.
Right, the behavior would change. Those are all the challenges. It was interesting to see the comments because the way Trump did it is, we're taxing ourselves. We could tax others, and we would be great as if there's this free money that exists out there. And that's like, nah, it doesn't really work that way.
Right.
If you, I even saw yesterday, with the whole thing with, with if he was do the Columbia, people don't pay the taxes. The taxes has to be paid by the Colombian companies. Well, yeah, that's like minimum wage, though. If minimum wage goes up, you don't pay the minimum wage as a consumer directly, but they will raise the prices and you pay that.
Right.
And so that's there is no free money. And I wish I had the quote here in front of me because it was really interesting to see, what, and this is when he was speaking to Congress.
Well, and this has always been the brick wall you run into on whether it's national sales tax or an idea like this is what we mentioned just a moment ago. And that is, all right, you're going to start taxing people who haven't been taxed. They're not paying any income tax. They may pay FICA tax. That's not an income tax. So you're going to start taxing them. Well, then the conversation quickly turns into, but we would give them an exemption. Well, now you've got a very different, because you're changing, you would have to change, basically the behavior has to change. Look, we've talked about where if the IRS had to come to your door at payday and collect every payday instead of it being garnished from your wages, if it were that, then people might pay attention to what the government is spending. In a situation where people are going to the store and all of a sudden it was, let's say, an 80% tariff in order to get us there, right, on things. Well, the behavior would change drastically. It wouldn't be, okay, I'm going to do this so that we have revenue for essential government services. You're charging me through the roof and I can't afford to do that. So then you create another situation, and that is a massive black market on a number of things, on anything and everything. And people just go anywhere to, I need to get, as cheap as I can get. I need to get my budget as close to what I can get. With that behavior changing, the revenue that you anticipated would be coming in is no longer, you have to change the outlook.
I found the quote. Here's the quote. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich foreign nations, we should be tariffing and taxing foreign nations to enrich our citizens. The message is there's free money out there, and there is no consequences for American citizens. And it's amazing the number of people. I've said, though, we've many times before, we have a population that is quite ignorant on how economics works. You can manipulate an economy. You cannot manipulate economics because people are going to respond to incentive and disincentive. It's that easy.
And if prices went up, whatever it would take to get revenue where we needed it to be, then you're talking about a massive change, a massive shift in how the market responds, how people respond in their spending. Right. That behavior would change drastically.
Well, and you're not talking about, you can use, as the president did, with Colombia, you can do targeted tariffs or threats of targeted tariffs. And you see the, Colombia crumbled.
In his first term, we talked about China and how you could put the pressure on China through tariffs. China deserved that. That's one way to leverage against China and trying to get them in line with intellectual property rights.
Right, but the American consumer would feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't do it without pain. There's going to be a cost.
Right. And that's the thing, when J.D. Vance was out there trying to make it seem like there is no penalty to pay for tariffs. Well, there is. It's either an increase in prices or layoffs on industries that have to buy from the protected industry. As we saw, it's why Bush stopped the steel tariffs like a year into it because they realized, we were trying to save jobs and we lost more jobs, not in the steel industry. The steel industry had increased profits.
But other industry and manufacturing.
Because they were charging more.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had increased profits, but the companies that bought the steel in the United States were hurt by it. The other thing is you have to realize that once you make it, because the president can throw in emergency tariffs, but if you say we are going to have, and by the way, it's never going to happen in our lifetime where we're going to have tariffs, get rid of the income tax and use tariffs. That isn't happening anywhere in our lifetime. And so it's all hypothetical to begin with, but the president said it yesterday when speaking to Congress that that's what he wishes the taxes to become. Well, once you do it, as we've said, you and I would both want a constitutional amendment to end the income tax to begin with. You cannot give government. That's the last thing I want to see Republicans do is say, well, no, just add this tax and we won't collect that one. No, if you leave it on the books, they'll use it again if they can't find the revenue.
This was the biggest flaw in the Herman Cain 999 plan.
Yes.
And we talked about that. You can't have, and then the response initially was, well, it would only be temporary. No. Not for one moment.
No. And those were, by the way, some of those were conservatives trying to tell us it would just be temporary, calling themselves conservatives who went, no.
Right.
And so what would happen in this case is you'd have to actually have Congress pass, that law. I don't see it happening. We talk about, for example, the differences, because taxes affect the economy different, which is why, for example, on capital gains tax, it affects the economy more because that affects direct investment. But it's what's the purpose of a tax? Is it to raise revenue? Is it to raise revenue and protect an industry? But as you said, though, before, if you put, for example, tariffs in, there is no way except to give credits to 50% of the population that isn't paying it, and all of a sudden government is involved in manipulating the economy on one end, and then government policy from the federal government is to throw throw credits all over the place. We already know that Josh Hawley's talking about the increase of the child tax credit. By the way, once you find out that people don't have more children because you may give them $2,000 or $3,000 a year, because that isn't the incentive. People have children because they wish to have children.
Right.
And when you have a society that doesn't want to have children, once that doesn't work, you're going to want to up that. But Josh Hawley was saying, no, we need to take that, even if they don't pay any taxes. Well, they pay Social Security taxes. Well, then, where is that money coming from? Because pretty soon we're going to have to be using tax dollars to actually subsidize Social Security.
Well, and, you hit it, and I was about to go to the welfare thing. You basically would have to create this new with these exemptions or credits or however you would do that for the people that aren't paying income tax now, that 50%. You're going to have to set up a system because they're going to hit tariffs every time they go to the store. It's going to be every day. So what, do they have an exemption? How do you work that? How do you work the system where, okay, you pay it, and then do you get an instant credit?
Well, no, it would basically be just a generalized tax credit to anybody who makes anybody who doesn't pay taxes or under a certain income would get $10,000 from the government a year. So then, but then again, you're going to have to raise tariffs even more. Because as we've said, the amount of tariffs you would have to put on to raise the revenue we have today would basically be 100% tariffs, and nobody's talking about that.
Well, and all year long, those people would have to pay the tariffs and wait for their tax return to get that credit. See, there's the problem. There's the conundrum.
Why, as George Costanza said, why must there always be a problem?
There's always a problem.
866-98-RED-EYE.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Now, I might consider tariffs that Trump was talking about instead of the income tax. I might consider it if we go back, because the tariffs only supported a federal government that was 2% of GDP instead of 24% of GDP.
That's kind of where I was going earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
If we have tariffs and go back to the federal government only being 2% of the GDP.
If it limits the spending.
Then you might have massive economic growth because of a lot less federal spending.
Exactly. So if they could make those cuts.
Right.
And it would all have to happen at the same time again.
But now I'm on acid.
Yeah, well, or smoking something. Or maybe we need to. I don't know. I don't know how any of this works.
I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America. We are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
You know, it's interesting, just, when we were talking about President Trump yesterday, talking about the fact that, we could fund the entire budget on tariffs and get rid of the income tax. And as you and I've said, that's not going to happen in our lifetime. But when you actually look at it, because some of the claims he was making was that it was, for example, if you look from 1870 to 1913, it was the richest time ever. Well, except for wartime, we were basically spending anywhere between 1% and 2% of our GDP on federal government spending. The federal government didn't do anything.
Right.
You look at now, and roughly almost from 2023, 2024, almost 25% of GDP, of our GDP, is federal government spending. That's the problem. So when you look at tariffs and you say, okay, funding 2% of GDP is one thing, funding 25%.
Yeah.
And that's why we went through the figures and said, okay, let's look at, and that's what I did. Yesterday I went, okay, let's check to see, how much revenue would the tariffs, and I'm only go by what Trump has said, by the tariffs that Trump has that Trump has said, what would you raise? And if it was 25% across the board, you would roughly raise 1/3 of the income tax that we raise now. And if it was 40% on China and 10% on the rest of the world, you'd roughly raise 25% of what we pull in right now from the federal income tax. Now, you and I are debating and moving closer to the fact that if we can get the federal spending to 2% of the GDP, we might go for the tariffs.
Yeah. Look, it's where I was going last hour when I brought up, if the IRS came to your door at payday, every payday, and they had to collect that way instead of garnishing your wages, then everybody would ask eventually, in fact, pretty quickly, hey, what are you doing with all my money? And if you were going to the store and prices were, 80% more, 50% more, 40% more at pretty much everything at Walmart. If that's a joke about China. If you have when you have to explain it, if you had that kind of accountability mindset, then things might drastically change. Or when we step back into reality, it would be, well, we can't do this and inflict the pain on the people who aren't paying taxes now, because you're raising taxes on the lower and middle income individuals, half of the people that essentially don't pay any income tax. Because then you get into, and you brought up Josh Hawley wanting to talking about bringing the child tax credit to another level, and we've talked about that before because it was Mike Lee and the current Secretary of State Marco Rubio who pushed for and eventually got the increase in the fully refundable amount for the child tax credit. That is welfare. If we're paying people more than they're paying in,
right,
then that's welfare. So if you were to do this, because think about this. All right, so now people that don't pay any income tax are going to the store and they're paying whatever, 40, 50, 80% more, wherever it landed, right? Which is a massive chunk to pay at the store. Well, they're going to get hit hard immediately. They can't wait for their return every year in order to get that money from the government. So what do? It would have to be a credit. It would have to be an exemption. It would have to be maybe a monthly stipend. The liberals would love this. Start sending them a check every payday based on their activity at the store, based on what they paid in tariffs. It's the only way politically you're going to get that done. I know everybody's saying, well, everybody should pay their share in taxes. Everybody should pay taxes. They don't. And politically, to get that done, we can have that conversation, but nobody else is having that conversation until you walk through implementing a plan like this. And inevitably, that's what it gets to. It's the same with the national sales tax. Well, you impose a national sales tax. Look, a lot of us conservatives were talking about a national sales tax. All right, great. But now that means that people who buy on the black market would, or people who the drug dealers and people who don't actually work for a living and don't have any wages to garnish would actually have to pay taxes. Well, that creates, again, a black market. We talked about that earlier, which would happen to a certain extent. But the big political game, the big political football would be the lower and middle income people who aren't paying taxes now, income tax. So they go to the store, and whether it's a national sales tax or a tariff, they're going to be paying a lot more. Well, what do? Well, they need that relief right then at checkout. They don't need that relief. At the very least, it would have to be a monthly or semi-monthly paycheck to them, government check to them, which is welfare. Now, it would highlight the fact that it is welfare. When we talk about the child tax credit, we've always said, nope. If you're giving people money more than they pay in, that's welfare. Write a welfare bill and see if you can pass it on Capitol Hill. Call it welfare. Put the legislation together, and let's see how that goes for you. Well, this would be, the implementation of this would be, okay, what are you going to do? You're going to give people a card where they're exempt? Let's say you do that. All right, I'm exempt from the tariff. Hey, Grandma, this is your favorite grandson. Listen, I can't go to the store today, and I know you get that exemption. I don't get that exemption. Hey, could you buy me this or buy me that? I'll give you the money, and you go to the store for me. You order it for me. You get the exemption. You see, the holes in it would be because politically you can't get away with, as much as conservatives would love to say, everybody pays 10% income tax tomorrow. It's not going to happen because politically you're not going to get it done. I mean, even people like Josh Hawley will tell you, well, no, we need to help people. We need to help people. We need, the big bad corporations, blah, 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 blah. And he's supposed to be a conservative.
I don't think I finished with this when we were talking about it before. But one of the things is because we mentioned that, you can use targeted tariffs, to get, Colombia to do what Colombia needs to do. But once it becomes tax policy, Congress would have to pass it, get rid of the income tax, and then they would have to assign what the tariff would be to bring in the revenue that we're bringing in now. Can you imagine that debate, by the way? The other thing is then you would have once that became permanent tax policy, that would become tax policy of every country that dealt with us, that traded with us. They would reciprocate against the United States. There would be less consumption because, in essence, it's a consumption tax. And if everybody piles on to it, well, then you have the problem of restricting GDP growth at that point, which is why, when we talk about it before, different taxes have different effects on the economy. Let's go to Charles in Arizona. Charles, welcome. You're on Red Eye Radio. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. So I was listening to what you were saying there, and I wondered, what would the percentage of a flat tax need to be if the size of the government was shrunk to, say, 5% of the GDP?
What would a flat tax have to be? Not a tariff. You're talking flat tax.
Yeah, you're talking about 10% flat tax. What would the percentage need to be if the size of the
it's
GDP...
not a flat. We're not talking flat tax. We're talking tariffs.
Yeah, but if it were the tariff, I don't know what that would be. But
what we saw, and this goes back when Steve Forbes was talking about it. So I'm about 15 years ago.
His scheme.
it was anywhere between 17 and 21%.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what the limit would be. That's the flat tax. That's not a tariff. A flat tax is not a tariff.
Right.
But at that point, it would be like it was between 17 and 21%. And again, that could be debated. But I don't know what it would be if
so raising tariffs. My question is, if raising tariffs would shift the profitability of locally producing in America things that we were importing with the high tariffs, and wouldn't that produce additional revenue from jobs and industry and everything else?
You would hope it would, but the fact is, if you were trying to export it, every nation that trades with us would also put a tariff on.
Those domestic producers would also be negatively affected.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the supply would go up and the demand would stay the same, and so your prices would come down. That would be deflation,
which means
so people would be able to.
Which means, well, if that were to happen, then you just defeated your first point, and that means profitability would be down.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is no squeezing one end of the water balloon without the other side of the water balloon being inflated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's the way it's going to work. People are going to act on their incentive and disincentive.
And then what you see at that point, though, you see less consumer goods available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
You see less consumer.
Limited, right.
They would limit what they sell in order to be able to raise the price.
Right.
Well, so like, for example, oil. Okay, if we had a surplus of oil and natural gas and we're exporting that and the price of oil and gas went down, then everything else that depends on oil and gas becomes cheaper, right?
Well, but the exports would be tariffed by...
I know that takes money out of the pockets of the oil industry, but...
Yeah, well, the tariffs on the exports, the other countries buying that from us, their tariffs would increase, which would drop those exports dramatically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, it's the thing that we look at that, and I don't care what politician it is, everybody tries to sell you that the government can somehow manipulate economics. They can manipulate an economy, but they can't manipulate how people respond to incentive and disincentive. And if you put tariffs on other countries, they're going to reciprocate and put it on you. That's just natural. I mean, that's economics. People respond to that, and every time they respond to it in a certain way.
And Charles, where you were with your first question is kind of where it needs to be aimed at, and that is government spending. There needs to be a political will for spending to drop dramatically, but we're not close to that.
What you need and nothing else. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because if we did that, then we could limit. Again, we could say, okay, well, we don't this revenue, I mean, it would have to be dramatic.
But then you're talking balanced budget, and who's going to buy into that?
Well, that's it. There's a handful of us fiscal conservatives left, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants the cuts. In fact, you can get people to respond to polls and say, yeah, no, the government spends too much. We need to cut spending. And then you start asking them, okay, what if we cut this in your neighborhood? What about your federal funds for your kids' schools? And everybody screams no. So, that's the problem. You're going to run into that. We've seen that over the years. I don't expect us as a nation to get anywhere close to that, quite unfortunately, in my lifetime. I don't expect that. But at some point, when we can no longer, we talked about where the interest on the debt is right now, and at some point when we can no longer service the interest on the debt, then programs will go away. There won't be cuts. They will just vanish because there won't be any money for them. It will be a massive problem economically.
Yeah, you've maxed out the international credit card, and
and that's it.
Now you're stuck with a budget that you have to live with.
Yeah. Thanks, Charles. We appreciate the call. But it's
when Trump was saying, I want interest rates down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Fed tries to do it, but we see what happens when the Fed tries to manipulate the debt. And Trump looks at it and goes, I want interest rates down because the interest rates have gone up, which means we went from 10 years ago, probably $200 billion in interest payments. We're at they expect 1.2 trillion this year. If doing the figures on the tariffs, if you decided to do 10% tariffs across the board, 25% tariffs across the board, or whether you attempted to do the 40% on China and 10% across the board, both figures Trump has mentioned, neither would raise the money that we would need just to pay the interest on the debt.
Right. Yep.
Just the interest. Forget about buying anything. You couldn't even pay the interest on the debt.
Right.
And so that's the challenge. It sounds great. It sounds great to get up there and say, well, have other countries pay it? And why are we paying taxes? Let other countries pay our taxes. Doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way. Well, then they'll put their tariffs on, and then all of a sudden, productivity drops domestically, profitability drops, and what do you have? Then you have politicians screaming, "Well, we need to go back to the income tax."
Now, if that chip, you saw that China chip, right?
Yeah.
The new China chip. So, that could massively increase productivity. Now, what scares me about massively increasing productivity is not job loss. Instead, if you have that incredible amount of increase in productivity, government will say, well, then we can spend a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I fear.
Exactly. Yeah.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Owner-operator Mike Nichols is leased to Wayne Transports, pulling in their dry bulk division today after decades in business for himself. Speaking to Overdrive's Todd Dills recently, Nichols offered a word of advice to any company driver planning to make the switch to running as an owner-operator. Unless you've got access to family money or otherwise independently wealthy, he noted.
As a company driver, you need to be thinking about startup capital and down payment. And I would just say that you need to treat that like you would firewood. Save what you think you might need and then triple it, if not quadruple it. And you'll be thankful that you did.
You'll be glad you did. That is, not just given favorable loan terms with a good down payment. Inevitably with trucking, you'll get hit with a breakdown and huge repair bill, or another of those unforeseen events. You'll need that reserve cash to cover it and avoid taking on debt or going out of business. Hear more from Overdrive's 2024 Trucker of the Year contenders at overdriveonline.com/PIB.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. But interesting, though, just when I was doing the research on federal spending as a percentage of their GDP, And when you look at it, I mean, you go back to 1810, where it's like 1% of the of the GDP. Then you go to the Civil War, it skyrockets to 15%. Well, of course it did.
Yeah.
Then World War I. Think about this: we spend more of a percentage of GDP now than we did during World War I.
Wow.
Which it spikes when you're involved in a world war.
Yeah.
Now it spiked about 23%. We're near 25 now. World War II, 43%. By 2030, we're already there. We're already at 25%. We were 25% a couple of years or year ago. By 2050, they expect it to be closer to 30% of GDP, federal spending.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I will let you know that when I was doing my calculations and this is based on when the president was talking to Congress and talking about that, we need to get to the point where, we have tariffs and no income tax. By the way, that's not in the reconciliation bill this year. I want to make that clear.
All right.
I mean, it'd be and it's not going to happen during his administration. It's not going to happen in our lifetime. But it's an interesting conversation to have. But when I figured out, how much tariffs would raise based on the figures, the percentage figures the president has come up with, which is, again, it was 40% on China and then 10% on the rest of the world. And then you've heard the figure 25% across the board. So I took 25% across the board, and then I took the other one, 10% and 40%. And if you did the 10% and 40% on China, you'd roughly raise about 25% of what we raise right now in federal income tax. And if you had 25% across the board on everything that came into the United States, you would roughly raise a little over a third of what we get in federal income tax. Now, I did not count in that FICA tax. I did not, which would add a ton more, because federal income tax alone is $2.1 trillion. FICA would be another $1.61 trillion. These are all 2023 figures here. As you can see, I'm not looking at a piece of paper. That's how much time I wasted yesterday trying to figure all this out. And it doesn't count the roughly about $450 billion in corporate taxes. But the $2.1 trillion that is raised in federal income taxes also does include people who file their business through the regular income tax. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure I covered it all. So, again, those are the challenges, but there is no free lunch. And if you look at the responses, especially on social media to it, people are like, yeah, we need to tax them and not us. It doesn't really work that way.
Well, yeah, we're going to get rid of your taxes and make Mexico pay for it. That's
right.
Not going to be the approach.
Doesn't really work that way.
Well, because the behavior, again, changes at every turn. Behavior with domestic producers would change. We had the previous caller who talked about, okay, what would happen here as we kind of workshop through all of this. Well, the fact of the matter is that people going to the grocery stores or the hardware store or whatever store and seeing a massive increase, well, then you say, well, no, because we hear this. Well, no, domestic producers would fill the void. But domestic producers, because the number one goal of tariffs is to provide protection to domestic producers. It is protectionism. So then those domestic producers would raise their costs because if you're looking to protect them, well, my gosh, shouldn't they be more profitable? So here's this ebb and flow of the marketplace during this entire scenario. All right, so they raise their costs. Well, wait a minute, we thought it's going to be much cheaper. Well, they only have to be more competitive than the tariffed import. They just have to be basically a penny cheaper. Let's say $1 cheaper. But then we look at that and it's still an increase. We thought it was going to be cheaper. It's still an increase, and we're buying American goods. What's going on? Let's reduce what we're buying. Then we reduce what they're buying. And we kind of went over this with a caller. Then there's a glut of supply. When there's a glut of supply, prices drop. What happens after the prices drop?
Profits go down.
Profits go down. Production goes down. Layoffs happen.
People get laid off. Well, that's what happened even with the Bush steel tariffs and also the Trump steel tariffs. As you noticed, because when J.D. Vance would talk about it, he talked about specifically, well, it didn't cause a huge spike of inflation. Well, of course it caused a little inflation, but it didn't cause massive inflation because the as a percentage of the economy, it's small, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually was able to list the number of job losses from any company that bought steel from that company. Now, the steel companies made more of a profit, even if they sold a little less, because they were able to up their price.
Right.
But it was the people, the American companies that would buy that steel that were laying off.
In fact, I talked to an executive, a friend of mine at the time, he has since passed, was an executive for a global parts supply company. And their manufacturing in the U.S. was going away because of the Bush steel tariffs. They were moving their manufacturing for North America to Mexico. And I asked the question, well, if the tariffs end up going away, which they eventually did, would there be a return back to the U.S.? And he said, likely no, and there wasn't. There, at least for that factory, that operation, what they were producing, they may be producing other things here in the States since, because this goes back a ways. But the point is that getting them to come back to the U.S., what we're trying to do is bring more producers into the U.S. And then everybody goes, well, see, that's what the tariffs are designed to do. If you come here, you won't be charged the tariff. Well, the problem with that, again, is that there's still going to be that negative impact, because if they become a domestic U.S. producer, they're still going to, in order to protect their profits, keep their prices high at first. We slow down on our buying. There's a glut of inventory. They go down. Their prices drop. When they bottom out, there's going to be less profits. There's going to be more layoffs. And there you have this inconsistent back and forth based on the huge behavioral changes. One of the things, and we can have the discussion all day long about your wages being garnished by your employer in order to pay your taxes as you go along. If you're an employer, if you're a business owner, you pay them. You're supposed to pay them as you go along. But with the average person, with the middle income individual, low middle income individual, and anybody who works for somebody else, it became more of a consistent method of, okay, I'm just going to look at the net of my check when it hits the bank, right? That's all I pay attention to. Well, if people paid more attention to how much they were paying in taxes, and this time of year, they kind of start to, some of them, if they actually pay income tax, then, there is a greater sense of, we need to hold them more accountable. But that hasn't actually grown. But the point is, in taxing people through your employer and garnishing those wages from your paycheck, it is building a consistent mindset of, okay, we're going to have a consistent flow to the Treasury, and people are going to be used to this. It's much harder when you're taking the money. This is the Dave Ramsey theory, right? You got money in an envelope, that's your money to spend. You put it in different envelopes, that's going to be it. When you have to take that money, when you're not just signing something like a credit card or financing a car or something like that, when you actually have to hand over your own money, man, you're a lot more careful with it. It's just a different psychology. And so if you put tariffs on people, because the cost of everything would go up, the national sales tax, we talked about it. There would have to be a retraining beyond the conservative people who support this. The American public and their mindset and their behavior would have to be retrained in order to realize, okay, but you're not paying taxes out of your paycheck. Again, those who pay taxes, income tax. And we can have these discussions all day long. We talked about leveraging that you could get to get people or other countries rather in line with where you want them to be. Colombia is the best example of that. As long as they don't call your bluff, which they didn't in the case of Colombia, they turned around within a matter of hours, and it worked. You leverage the tariffs, 25%, and in 1 week it jumps to 50. Okay, that got their attention. China, intellectual property rights. We talked about it back during Trump's first term. The problem with that is, all right, if you're tariffing all these other nations who are our trade partners and our allies, and you're trying to put pressure on China, we need those those other countries to be in line with us to choke China out. That would be the threat. We will send manufacturing elsewhere, and we'll put tariffs on your goods that are coming in from your country. That leveraging can and often does work. But if you're talking about replacing an income tax system,
a permanent policy,
as a permanent policy, you're talking about something very different. And two, when you talk about, all right, let's go back to the way it used to be. Well, but people weren't trained the way they are today. Again, the psychology was different. If everything had changed and all of a sudden they went to the store and let's say they did it the same way, they put income tax in first and then said, no, we're going to go to tariffs, there still would have been that same dynamic that I'm talking about, because they were looking at tariffs and then all of a sudden, well, wow, here's the income tax. We can talk about all the problems with the federal government and income tax. Well, the reality is we have a national debt that is massive. We have the interest on the debt that is massive. We have a system that is in place right now that is giving welfare, quite frankly, on the child tax credit to families, but 50% of people don't pay income tax. And if you try to catapult them into paying much higher prices based on those tariffs, politically, you're not going to get there. It's not going to happen.
And like I said, one of the biggest problems is the federal government back then when Trump was talking about, the tariffs were able to, supply the government. The federal government wasn't doing anything.
Right.
They didn't do anything compared to what they do now, as you said.
Right.
Roughly in that time period, between 1% to 2% of GDP was spent on federal spending. Now it's 25%.
Yeah. There was no infrastructure. There was no interstate system. You think about that.
There was no transfer payments,
right?
Like we have,
right?
Like we have today. There wasn't these massive departments that throw money all over the entire country.
Right.
I mean, that's why you look at it and you say, well, yeah, what you would need to tariff back then is nothing compared to what you'd need now. You'd have to tariff 12, 13, 4, and continue. If federal spending continues to go up like it's going to go up, it would be tremendous. The other thing, though, is no matter what you believe economically, and what I find is people believe that economics is an opinion, and it's not. It's actually an observation. Sort of like gravity. People only react one way to incentive. They don't sit there and say, I don't want incentive. They always act a particular way for an incentive or disincentive. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, whatever economic system you wish to live under, everybody is saying, well, we need to massively increase production in the United States. Well, for that, you're going to need more people. Trump knows it.
Yep.
This is the interesting thing. What Trump believes on legal immigration, the majority of the people that support him don't.
Right. Yeah.
Trump says we're going to need a lot of legal immigration. His supporters don't want. And by the way, it's justifiable based on the fact that nobody trusts the government to do any type of immigration after what we've just seen over the last 50 years.
Yeah, no, I get it. I absolutely get it.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. By the way, look at this. I'm just looking at this headline. Trump says Microsoft in talks to acquire TikTok. Man, imagine the latest TikTok Windows update coming your way.
You mean every time you turn your device on?
It's gonna,
4 times a day?
It's going to take... You're going to load to TikTok. It's going to take you...
You'll be able to watch a 30-second video in 10 hours. Please wait.
It's another Microsoft update.
Please wait.
On TikTok.
Do not turn off your device. Please wait. Please wait. Please wait. Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
First thing I thought of, I go, wow, Microsoft is.
No. And then every other day, oh, we have a security patch, a security patch, a security patch. My gosh. The entire thing is one big patch.
Oh, wait, you're based in the United States now.
Right, exactly.
More security patches when China owned it.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Welcome. Well, I've got to tell you that I looked up at the clock and went, wow, I just love talking economics. It is my favorite thing to talk about. I know we talk about a bunch of other different things, but when it really comes down to it, that is really my favorite thing of anything to talk about. I just find economics fascinating. I find, I don't care whether, what government it is through history, but there's always that cycle where new people come into government and believe, if you, and it goes back to, oh, wow. I remember when I was in high school and it was like, well, communism works. It's just the right people aren't running it. I always go back to that one. And it's like socialism. Well, the problem with socialism is the right people aren't controlling it.
Well, we heard from a lady one night and we talked about a single payer system. Well, the problem is, look, we're the United States. We'll do it right. Everybody else just did it wrong. That's what they want you to believe. We'll get it right. Look at all the wealth we have. We'll get it right. Okay. Yeah, there is no magic answer. Well, there's a very simple answer that nobody has the will. This is the thing. Cut the spending. What are we talking about? In terms of raising, this new discussion on tariffs is about basically funding the government.
Mm-hmm. Well, funding the government while protecting U.S. businesses.
Right. But it's the big part of funding the government is what? would be much more controllable if we would control spending.
Right.
There is no political will. Everybody is. It's like we look away from the spending part and go, "Aha! We found a new." Well, no. Focus on the spending. I know we have Doge, but Doge isn't going to do anything but suggest, and then of course Congress is going to laugh at it for 10 minutes and go back to doing what they do. You know, we can point to, in fact, both parties, and we're not both parties are wrong and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to overspending, they're both guilty. Where is the real fiscally sane policy put forth by anyone in a serious way? Not just anyone. It would have to be a group of someone's on Capitol Hill. Well, we get back to the fact that there are only a handful of us fiscal conservatives left.
Project 2025.
Which is now Project 2026 because we can't afford it. Not this year, kids. Maybe Santa will bring us another project next December.
Fiscal conservatism only exists in fiscally conservative think tanks.
Well, it's the only way. Exactly. And those think tanks are just that. They do a lot of thinking. Man, we're still thinking.
But they don't do anything.
Yeah.
They do a lot of thinking.
Hey, what you got in the tank? Thinking.
Like us.
Yeah. We're thinking. But that's what we get back to. You know, everybody's looking for this magical solution. Well, there is a solution. There's no will to implement that solution. And that is greatly control and reduce your spending. That's what it's all about.
Well, I just got a message from one of our listeners who said, well, doesn't believe in tariffs, but said, we need to lower the salaries, that salaries are too high. That's how to do it.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to happen. And when you look, for example, at the United States minimum wage of $7 or whatever, $7.65, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Texas still has that. That doesn't affect anything because the marketplace is what really is setting the minimum wages these days.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, you may have places like California and New York where it isn't, but they're suffering for that. Yeah. And what that means is you're going to bring in more AI quicker. The incentive that's economics.
Yeah.
That's where Democrats believe that they can run economics. Well, you can't. You can manipulate an economy, but all you do is create an incentive to do what? Automate. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. I mean, that's the way that economics works across the board.
You have to create those efficiencies one way or the other.
But if you're looking at what we should do here, and a lot of what Trump proposes is absolutely right. And that would be lower electricity prices, one of the biggest increases that cost manufacturing in the United States. Mm-hmm. In fact, I saw someone from the administration say the other day, it's the biggest increase in the cost of doing business in the United States and manufacturing is electricity.
Yeah, right.
And you can do something to lower it, and you can ensure that there's plentiful energy across the board, and then you can keep us competitive through regulations and lower corporate tax rate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like Trump says, if you're going to expand the economy, and I just find it incredible because it's sort of like I always go back to the whole, the whole Ron Paul thing on free trade.
Yeah,
where we couldn't find anybody. And this goes back, 15 years ago? Probably 15 years ago?
Yeah.
That nobody knew where Ron Paul stood on free. He's against free trade because he's against NAFTA. It's like, no. He views NAFTA as managed trade. He wants a company in Iowa to be able to do business with a company in Egypt and the federal government not be involved in it at all. That any company should be able to deal with whoever they want with no tariffs, nothing. Nothing, that it is absolute free trade. Oh, gosh, people were you had Ron Paul supporters that were furious. We had to tell them, go to his website.
Yep.
And look at it. You
Yeah.
don't even know. And these people were passionate about Ron Paul.
Right.
Well, sort of the same thing with Trump on legal immigration. The vast majority of people, and when you look at it, look at Republicans on legal immigration. They're all against it, and Trump's out there saying, no, we need lots of legal immigration if we're going to grow this economy.
Exactly.
Because we don't have a baby boom. And by the way, I mentioned this. The only hate mail I've gotten in a long time, I got a hate mail when I was talking about what Trump believed, needs to be done and explained. Women aren't coming into the workforce post-World War II like they did. It's not going to be a baby boom.
Right.
And in order to have that 2.5-3% growth, whatever the average has been over that time period since post-World War II, we needed tens of millions of people. Well, there is no birth rate anymore.
Right.
We don't have it.
Right.
And that's just reality. You're going to need it unless the new AI, and you don't hear as much anymore. There was a panic on AI about a year and a half ago. All the jobs will be gone. It's like, I've been hearing that. Well, I haven't been hearing that since the 1850s.
Close, but yeah.
But that comment has been brought with technology. All the jobs are going to be gone.
Right.
1970, I was told I'm only going to be working a 3-day work week.
Right.
That didn't happen, did it? As I said in talk radio, I started out in an hour, went to 2, went to 3, went to 4, went to 5. And we actually had a boss about 15 years ago suggest 6. And we said, no, 5's enough.
Right.
5's enough.
We had that boss fired.
Well,
Or
the basic
maybe
thing
he
was,
just moved on.
well, you really don't do anything for 5 hours, so why not throw a 6th in there?
Yeah, come on. You could do 10, can't you?
Yeah, I'm glad you really appreciate what we're doing here. I'm glad we make it sound so easy.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are just, you're just talking.
Right.
What's the big deal of that?
Exactly.
So I've just, but I understand why people don't want legal immigration, because they don't trust the federal government.
Right.
They don't trust the federal government because they've seen what has happened over the last 50 years. And they figure, well, if it's going to be legal immigration, they're just going to try to throw in illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And so when will that happen? When will that need actually be there? I don't know. But the best you can do is, again, lower the cost of energy, have as much competition as possible, and increase efficiency and productivity. That's what will drive it. The government can't come in and lower wages.
No.
And that's not the problem anyway. The wage that's set in the competitive marketplace is not a problem with industry.
No, it isn't. In fact, you look at the minimum wage in that discussion, it's all but gone because nobody's making minimum wage. It used to be, the idea used to be, and I've always said, minimum wage needs to be 0. There shouldn't be a minimum wage. Everybody, what are you talking about? It became a popular thing, by the way, going back to our day. And I've made minimum wage back in radio. But then they paid me a salary and paid me less than minimum wage.
For the hours worked.
For the hours worked. And so, I've been there. I know what you're talking about. But it wasn't on the government, whether state or federal, to tell my employer what to pay me. Because the argument is, well, then they'll just pay them 0. Yeah, that's right. People will just work for free.
Yeah, that really didn't happen. It really reminds me. I love telling this story. People might not have heard it. It was one of my favorite stories when I was in a radio union one time. And the publication came out that the radio union for the city that we were in, they had increased the minimum salary, like, I don't know, it was like 15%, up to $36,000 is what it was.
Yeah.
And you're paying, dues to be in this union, and they're promoting this. And if you were a talk show host in that market, you made like $36,000. Well, we did a survey, and they made the big deal out of it. You're a union working for you. We found out the lowest talk show host was making $75,000 in that market. And they're bragging about $36,000. Well, Thanks for doing nothing. So you got into an intense negotiation about nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Imagine management going, well, we don't want to go above 33, but hey, let's go to 36 since it's still.
Yeah.
Since it's still 40,000 away.
Right, exactly.
From what we're paying the lowest person.
Right. And the discussion these days on minimum wage, on raising the minimum wage, is basically in that same lane, It's like, we're going to raise it to $9 an hour. We're going to raise it to $10 Yeah. Okay. Good luck. It's whatever you're doing. Okay, fine.
There's no buzz at all when that minimum wage is brought up. There's no buzz at all.
No, because the marketplace, either there is a shortage in one industry, one neighborhood, one sector, whatever it might be, and you'll see that sometimes, or there's an overall shortage of workers, and there's a lot of hiring going on, so there's that competition because there is that revolving door effect, and there's that, or the economy slows down, and it's not any of the above, which is not a great situation. But thank goodness we don't live eternally in a recession. Although I have a friend who has a business, and they are a corporate recruiter. And they say right now, January is when a lot of corporations will do their hiring, get their hiring set for the year, especially in key positions because they're looking to get their salary budget in order and in line for the year. And so January, according to at least the owner of one business that does corporate recruiting, is down by over 60%. So that's a huge concern. I saw over the weekend discussion about the media entertaining the idea of a recession. I don't know that we're at recession territory. The jobs numbers for last month came out. They were fairly healthy, but again, there's flaws in each of those government jobs reports that you can go through when you end up paring it down to the basics of what it actually was. The accounting is flawed. That needs to change too. President Trump, I know you're awake because he just woke up from his hour-and-a-half daily nap. He never sleeps. If you would get on that too, let's actually do a real accounting of the jobs that were created. Because if one person works through a temp agency and goes to 4 different sites in a month, each week in that month they go to a different site. So they go to 4 different sites in that cycle. They consider that to be 4 jobs. Well, it's one human. So that's an issue. There needs to be a revamping of how they account for jobs, because I think, and at first you're going to be. You remember when the electricity companies, your electric provider and your water provider went to being able to read remotely. And it was like, okay, this is a more accurate system, and everybody's like, whoa, that changed. Well, it will change. The accounting will change in the short term, but long term, it needs to be a more accurate picture as to what's going on with jobs. That's why everybody pays attention to ADP, the payroll company, to see what's actually going on in the private sector.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is here calling on Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Just reading here, 19 attorney generals just sent a letter to this was yesterday, to Costo, warning that DEI policies are illegal when they discriminate based on race. Who said a long time ago that DEI will end once the lawsuits start?
George Norrie. Oh, maybe somebody else.
Yes. Who said it will be lawsuits that will end all of this, all this stuff? And the lawsuit started, but still you have, companies now moving away from it. Really, though, there were lawsuits filed on it, but really it's more the culture changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
The culture's changing when people realize, well, you're discriminating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this is the problem that they run into in HR departments. You put in there are anti-discrimination laws, and then the liberals, as we've talked about, create their own roadblocks for themselves, but they do that for HR departments too. The HR departments look at it and go, wait a minute. How do we stay compliant with the anti-discrimination laws and also implement DEI policy?
You can't.
You can't do that. And whether it's the CEO that's doing it or, the government that's doing it on the government level, I would wonder about that too for government employees. Of course, Trump is ending that. But companies are getting out of it for that reason. A lot of them know that it doesn't work. But also, there's a culture thing. Look, if we're going to be the company that's going to, draw that line in the sand in the culture wars, well, you're not going to win that. You're going to lose a massive chunk of your customer base. And then beyond that, you may find yourself not in compliance with anti-discrimination laws.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose.
Thank you.
All right. This is CNN. Harry Enton yesterday as they talk about the polling on immigration. And this is interesting going back to 2017 when Trump first got in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to play it because this is just mind-boggling.
And what am I seeing? I just want to know how different things are from where we were when Donald Trump first took office and how much more the American people are on the side of Republicans than they were 8 years ago. So trust which party more on immigration. You go back to April of 2017. Look at this. The Democrats held an 11-point advantage over Republicans. So Americans were not liking what Donald Trump and the Republican Party was doing back at the beginning of his first term. Look at where they are now, though. Poll out just in the last week. After Donald Trump took office, which party you trust more in immigration? Look at the margin Republicans are putting up here. A 22-point lead over Democrats. You rarely see issues in which the American people side so much with one party over the other. But on the main issue that Donald Trump has been pumping up and Republicans have been pumping up since the beginning of his term that began just 1 week ago, Republicans lead overwhelmingly on this. It's not just unusual for right now. It's just so much different than where we were 8 years ago. It just gives the Republicans a lot more leverage.
I just sounded like Butthead there. It's not plus 22. Just to make sure that Harry understands. It's not plus 22 because Trump has been pumping it up. It's 22 points because the people of the United States started feeling the impact of the Biden open border policy.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Governor Abbott. Even though Governor Abbott did not send the majority of migrants to different states. It was the federal government who did it. That's what got the news.
That's what the liberal activists and media started covering it heavily when Governor Abbott started doing it. They were not covering it at all when the federal government was doing, when it was just the federal government doing. And you know, this concern with Harry Enton is kind of like the liberal media before, when they were saying, well, if people would just quit talking about a recession, there wouldn't be. They quit talking about inflation, there wouldn't be inflation. Well, it wasn't because Trump talked about it. It's because this is the concern of the people. This is where they are. This is their concern. Not because he's talking about it, but because it's happening. It's reality. And that's where they are. That's where people are. And you can't, you know, it's why he won. You know, he didn't win because he kept talking about it. He won because he was identifying, pointing to the reality that people were living every day. But it is interesting to see that massive swing. It's good.
No, it's good, but doesn't it show how wrong the American people were?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How the hell could it change 33%? The only reason is it was abstract to most Americans, even though it was right in front of their eyes what the Democrats have always wanted to do, and how they changed by April of 2017. We knew what the Democrats, you know, we knew what they wanted, and they delivered.
Yeah.
And the American public went, oh, well, you know, we just weren't thinking about this. We didn't know this could happen. You know, this is horrible. And now the Democrats don't know where to go. Let me play this here. This is Speaker Johnson yesterday. It's exactly what we said yesterday. Here we go.
All right. Democratic Party is in disarray. They have no obvious leader. They have no obvious vision or agenda. Their platform has to be rewritten whole cloth, and they don't exactly know how they're going to wander in this wilderness for the next couple of years. It's not just going to be a couple of years, though. It's going to be 4 years at least, and then more, because we are going to win, grow the House majority in 2026. Historically, when the president takes the Oval Office, then his party then loses, on average, a number of seats in the House in that first midterm. But that won't happen this time around because there's been a sea change. And we're going to deliver on this agenda, and that begins now.
Then this story. Democrats in Congress hired up an emotional regulation specialist. They actually have, it's plural, specialist, to help deal with some of the changes that have been coming with the new Trump administration.
Okay.
Trump, for his part, has hit the ground running, signing executive orders aimed at undoing the failures of the previous Democratic administration. During a mid-January retreat for Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, ranking member Jamie Raskin hosted psychologist Jim Cohn and consultant Hal Movius, the latter which specializes in emotional regulation, as well as Eric's like, all right, Gary, you don't even need to finish this damn thing. I know where you're going on it. Is that what that sound effect was?
Yeah, coloring books and cupcakes. All right, cupcake.
The latter, which specializes in emotional regulation as well as negotiation, influence, organizational development. Well, the shrinks counseled the Democrats on how to approach conflict and combat authoritarian styles of speech.
This makes me want to cry.
One attendee said the Democrats were advised to not get into partisan fights on the committee.
Okay. All right. Good luck with that.
When Raskin was asked about hiring psychologists for the retreat, by the way, that might not be a bad idea for Democrats. The lawmaker told the outlet, they're social psychologists. and they were just talking about communication and authoritarian styles of speech in the Trump age. He claimed that these psychologists were talking about basically communication styles during the Trump era as they moderated the session. Raskin will be working as a top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee with Chairman Jim Jordan and reportedly wants to approach his new role in a more measured way than how it was on the Oversight Committee, where Raskin often clashed with Chairman James Comer. Well, quote, "This is only President Trump's first week in office, and he's already broken the House Democrats' brains again. They're already calling the shrinks."
Yeah.
Said founder of the Article 3 Project, Mike Davis, said of the retreat with the psychologist. My God, I mean, they're just lost.
It really is dealing with children.
My God.
Regulating your emotions. Okay.
They still don't get it.
No.
And I know it sounds crude, but I can only say it this way. Stink, stank, stunk, like for the Grinch, doesn't cover it. The Democrats don't understand the reason they're losing is they suck on the issues.
Mm-hmm. And they always have.
You're nuts. And any psychologist is not going to change the fact that you suck on the issues.
Yeah, you really do. We all know it. This is the problem. This is the fundamental problem. When we were talking earlier about, tariffs to replace the income tax revenue. All right. Well, the fundamental problem is the spending. Well, the fundamental problem for the Democrats is the issues. We need our own Joe Rogan. You had the actual Joe Rogan for a long time. We need an Elon Musk. You had him too. He built the EV industry. If only he could take us to Mars. Give him about 10 more minutes. And what they don't see, I don't know that they ever will. The problem with the indoctrination, it focuses on all the wrong things. It focuses on everything but the issues. Indoctrination is about the agenda, which they will tell you are the issues, but those aren't actually the issues that people deal with.
Well, let's look at one of the issues the Democrats wish to deal with in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
You know exactly where I'm going, don't you?
I do.
We have not rehearsed
Here we
this.
go again.
I want to make it clear.
Yeah.
2 Pennsylvania Democrats want to erase biological sex from birth certificates to enable people to more easily shift their gender identity without facing bureaucratic roadblocks.
Yeah.
State Representatives Benjamin Sanchez and Joe Webster have proposed a bill that would remove biological reality of sex from birth certificates, a move they said would eliminate yet another form of discrimination people endure when there is an error in that category.
Mm-hmm.
As the quote, I want to make sure people know this is a quote from them, not me.
Okay.
As the times change, so does the need to assess our antiquated practices and procedures. Precedent already exists for amending what is required on birth certificate documents. For example, birth certificates used to indicate the race of an individual's parents, which had historically been used as part of systemic discrimination, the lawmakers said. As we have seen, removing race from birth certificate applications has had no impact on the document's original intention, which is to prove the birth itself and the place in which a child was born. Well, we don't need the child. We don't need the person's name.
No.
As long as the birth certificate exists, that person is officially born by government standards.
Mm-hmm.
These people are just idiots.
Yeah.
We can erase sex by not putting it on birth certificates. Good God. They're really chasing their tail, aren't they?
No, they are.
This is the football player in electric football going around in circles.
It is. At every turn. Well, if we just do this. Look, the problem is then on your birth certificate, it gets to the core of it. Civil rights. If anyone can belong to any protected class, because let's forget about gender. Why are you putting race down? You don't know what they'll identify as. You can't, because if you can't do one, well, yeah, but that would be ridiculous. I mean, that's what we always hear. That would be ridiculous?
Well, race
You're talking about
race is apparently off in Pennsylvania.
Well, but let's do it across the board in all states. Think about this. If you did this, if this were widely accepted, then you can belong to any protected class simply by saying so.
Yeah.
Which means there are no protected classes. You would decide which protected class you belong to, and that includes a white girl telling everybody for the longest time she's black. Rachel Dolezal.
Remember The View?
They tried to make excuses for it.
A person can be what they want to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's focus on that one. This whole, well, let's erase their well, all right. Let's erase on their ID or driver's license their height, their weight.
Yeah.
A lot of people are screaming, "Yeah, let's do away with the weight." Yeah. That's nobody's business. Let's do away with all that. Your entire identity. Oh, wait, we no longer need ID cards, which means you wouldn't need them for voting. Oh, I get it. Exactly. Erase everyone's identity so it's nothing.
Idiots.
Yep.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Fetterman was on The View. We'll have an audio cut of that. And the California Secretary of State has approved a campaign to gather signatures petitioning for a vote on whether California should secede from the United States. And this last push is because the last straw was Trump becoming president.
Yeah.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Well, Jim Acosta is out.
Didn't he just get a new show or something? I thought they just promoted him.
He didn't want to compete against us.
Well, now the good news is, they were moving him to midnight. Wasn't that was it? Yeah, nothing good happens after midnight, according to our management. And the good news is because he's a mic hog, and that, by the way, that's what the other members of the media called him the day he was kicked out of that room with Trump. The other members of the media were saying, this guy's a mic hog. He just holds the mic for himself, which he did, and wanted to basically conduct his own debate with Trump right there on the floor. But the good news for him is that he can buy a microphone and he can hog it all he wants now at home in his basement or wherever he lands. I was wondering, does he go to MSNBC? Are they even hiring? I mean, I with the cable news game, isn't it over? I mean, it's all but done, unless you're at Fox News.
You know, you and I were talking about the fact that CNN laid off like 200, but they're hiring 200 to go into digital.
Yeah.
And, you know, they want to do things like podcasts. And you brought up, because I've actually seen it, that Jake Tapper's podcast is basically on grief, on death.
Anderson Cooper's. Yeah.
Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
I say Jake Tapper.
Yeah.
Anderson Cooper. Sorry.
Yeah, it's dealing it.
Same difference.
I think it's the running theme is dealing with loss, and it's like, that's a tough one. I mean, you know, look, I get it, and but you look at why people tune in for a podcast, and typically it's an escape. So it could be a number of things. It could be fiction. It could be, it could be Joe Rogan. It could be, whatever it is. But you have to wonder if that theme, if it's going to be permanent, if that's going to attract a lot of people.
It came up in shuffle for me
Mm-hmm.
because I'll just let it go, and you don't know what's coming up next.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have commercials on YouTube, which is great. And I can't remember who the guest was, but I watched like 15 minutes of it, and it was interesting.
Mm-hmm. I watched the entire episode with Alex Van Halen. And they
that
were
was
talking
it.
about
That was it. It was Alex. It was Alex Van Halen. Yes, yes, that was it.
Talking about grieving the loss of his brother, and to me, that as a Van Halen fan, as an Eddie Van Halen fan, and you don't hear a lot in the past. You didn't hear a lot from Alex. He wrote the book, Brothers, but it was the first I've ever seen him speak. Yeah.
I'd never seen him do an interview before.
Yeah. No, he didn't do a lot of
in all that time. So I watched that, but then it came up with somebody else, and I went, okay, enough of this. It was I just,
look,
again, not that I don't sympathize with the people who have grieved, because I have, and I've had loss in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's not where my head is at right now. When I see something like that, I'm obsessed, just like you are. Every single day, I'm as close as you can get to an addict of news and current events.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I wake up, it's right to the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up, and somebody will text me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm laying in bed. Hour later, what are you doing? Still laying in bed. You're lazy. I'm doing show prep.
Well, no, I mean, because if you don't jump on it as soon as you wake up, it's only going to build. There's only going to be more the longer you wait.
Yeah. The Babylon Bee was right in that headline saying, journalists complaining there's too much to cover with Trump.
Yeah.
But it's always been, that way for us. So I'm looking for current events. Not that I can't go off into, I've been really into now the looking at all the YouTube analysis of all the portable generators.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The lithium ion or whatever it is, the iron,
mm-hmm.
whatever the new ones are
Mm-hmm.
out there, and how long they last and what they can run.
Mm-hmm.
And you know why? I worked at a radio station one time where, we had backup power, but we had just backup power for the transmitter and the studio. And it didn't have enough to run an extra coffee maker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I got into, they got these lithium ion. If you have one of those, can they run a coffee maker? Like, wow, they can. Well, now I'm interested in getting one. Because I'm thinking to myself, where I live, I saw it the last couple of weeks when it got cold.
Right.
They had the natural gas truck out there again at the front of our subdivision. We, for some reason, when it gets cold, and I live in a relatively new subdivision, they're still building houses in it. It's probably 20 years old. During Frizola, I couldn't run my fireplace. My furnace was going, but there wasn't enough pressure to run my fireplace. So where I live, it's useless to have a natural gas generator. And so it's like, okay, I can't trust the grid. I can't trust it. So I'm thinking maybe I should get one of those things to run a coffee pot, do stuff like that.
Right.
Just, and so I was looking at that. But besides that, everything I'm looking for is current event associated. So when I saw Anderson Cooper with that, I went, nah. But I think that's where they may be going, because I said to you, Eric, they're not going to go anywhere doing what they do, because they're already doing it on TV. They could just put that on digital on YouTube to begin with and get an audience. It's like, and you told me, goes, no, like Anderson Cooper's doing the thing on grief. They may be trying to branch out where CNN becomes not news, but they'll still have their news division, but it becomes the personalities doing something different.
Yeah. And you, if you're not known for that, if you're stepping outside your wheelhouse, that's a huge gamble, and we'll see where it goes. I don't know how successful it is. But I also noticed that those same channels are, in fact, every TV channel now has its own YouTube channel, because they realize, well, wait a minute, we own the content, so we can set up an official channel, and they can. It's like another revenue stream. It may not be as large as the commercial revenue stream that they have typically on television, or once had on television, but they can put it up there and they can provide content in that way online, and you can find it. I mean, I don't know what you can't watch now on YouTube. With the exception of things, you can watch movies, you have to pay for some of them. You can watch a number of things, but it's kind of becoming, or more and more becoming, it became this years ago, but when people started cutting the cord, it became this fragmented audience. And they realize, well, it doesn't matter that not everybody watches it at 7 p.m. It only matters that everybody watches it. So we have to reach a wide audience in order to get that revenue stream, keep that revenue stream. I don't know where they go on cable news. Fox News is doing all right. They're doing okay. But the problem will remain, and it's a growing problem, with more and more people cutting the cable. And it really is a generational thing. My 3 oldest grandchildren moving on and moving into their own places. Well, they're, my gosh, they're not going to pay for cable. They're not going to pay. They might pay whatever it is, for Netflix, but maybe they only pay that a month. That's part of the further fragmenting of the audience is, well, I'm going to jump off Netflix and get on Hulu for a month. I'm going to, I'm just going to follow. And I have friends and family that tell me that all the time. So I don't know how they monetize it going forward. But the getting back to the activism at cable news, it has damaged the audience in a big, big way. What is happening right now is not just the ebb and flow, the political ebb and flow, I believe. I believe there are permanent changes. I just saw attached to a story about, what's going on politically, a still shot from CPAC. And it says something that you and I have been saying for months. It was CPAC last year. But it says, awake, not woke. And the story was about the implementations of what Trump is doing and everything else, and moving away from DEI and all that. Well, but if when you look at what has been going on in these newsrooms, it was hip to be an activist and be, pretend to be a journalist, but you're really an activist and be in that role for a while, especially when everybody was on board for hating Trump. That's no longer the case. And not only it's not just that they discovered that people, this awakening, they've discovered the lies about Trump. It's the methods that the other side used, that the left used in creating those same lies about Trump, but also lying to the American people to your face on a number of things when you were living through a very different reality. They were trying to tell you your reality wasn't reality.
Well, it's like I think we played the audio. If not, I'll see if I can find it because I know I saved it, of Jim Acosta telling the one Republican, this is news. We tell the truth here. And then right after it, it's, where that somebody edited together where he wasn't telling the truth.
Right.
And it was like, I think that's one of the biggest problems, I think, with, for example, MSNBC and CNN. And in general, I think even liberals that wrote newspaper articles or whatever, is they've always claimed that they're journalists. They're not saying, people can accept if you say, I'm going to give my liberal opinion. And I'm going to, here's the story. Here's what I think about it. But they've always been disingenuous in their branding. And I think that's I think that's a huge problem that you say, no. I'm not a liberal. I look at both sides of the issues and we talk about the facts. Well, Costo did that the other day. Well, everybody knows that's a lie.
Right.
Everybody knows he's the biggest political partisan. So it's not that you're actually a partisan. People can accept that. Here's the news.
It's your methods.
Here's where I stand. Boom. It's the fact that you're initially lying to them.
Yeah.
You're telling them you're one thing and you're another thing, and people go, "Well, you're just full of it." They don't even want to give you a chance. And I think that was part of Acosta's problem. Well, when they tried to make him an anchor, because that's the other thing, you put somebody in an anchor desk, and here are the news for today, and then they spin it like crazy, and then they give their opinion, and you're just like, well, this isn't news, it's opinion. Well, you need to label it that way. Whenever we get people that call and say, well, I like you guys because you give both sides of the issues and you're completely fair and don't have, we've actually gotten this, and we're like, no, we're biased as hell.
Yeah, right.
We're biased. Of course, we're opinionated. We're biased. The one thing we don't want to do, though, we don't wish to tell you a lie on a story and analyze something that's a lie.
Right.
That's the one thing we don't want to do. We don't want to take a story and go,
well, it falls apart very quickly, but they, on the left, they don't care. If you're an activist on the left,
you
they
don't care. No, you don't. That's the whole point. You don't care, but you're presenting yourself to the audience as something that you're not.
And they know it. They know
right.
you're lying.
Before you even get to the topic.
Right.
And we were talking about Scott Jennings, for example. And people have asked me, they said, Scott Jennings is really good, though. Has he brought up the ratings at CNN? It's like, well, no, because you got to go through. Normally when he's sitting there, now once in a while they'll put another Republican there, but you got 7 people talking.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to Scott Jennings, you've had to go through 7 or 8 minutes of all these, the liberals on it. And then he makes his point where he's becoming very famous is on X.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe on Facebook, but on social media, because they're taking the shortcuts of the arguing back and forth. And it's like, wow, that was a great line. Boy, he got her there. But it's all packaged in that nice thing. And you and I said, well, maybe he could do a show. Well, I don't know if he could do a show on CNN because the brand and real estate matters in the business.
Mm-hmm.
You could be a great talent and you go on MSNBC and you're a Republican and you have that show and you're truly a conservative Republican, you might not get a great audience.
Right.
Yeah. Because the brand is, no, this is insane liberalism here.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, it's it really undermines everything you're trying to do when you're lying to your own audience.
Yeah.
You can't get away with telling them you played in Aerosmith. When I was in Bon Jovi, I told the guys, I said, one day I'm going to be on the radio, and I'm going to tell everybody I was in Aerosmith. It's going to be fun. You know that you should. If you care about it, you have to care first. This is what they really don't care. They don't care about anything regarding the truth. Acosta is a lot like Keith Olbermann. You give him a promotion, you make him an anchor, and he thinks he's won the debate. He thinks he's won. Oh, my methods of getting here clearly worked. Is it working for you now? To either one of them?
No. It's
not, because one thing that you have to look at, the business model, I don't care, when John Malone was talking about part of the Discovery Group, I think they call them Warner Discovery Group now, but when they were coming in as the owners of, the new owners of CNN, they were talking about how, we need to get back to just the plain news reporting on CNN. And we were saying, no, opinionated is fine. You've got to be honest about it. That's all you got to do. These people are lying. Whether you're left or right, you've got to be transparent and honest about it.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hotshot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on roadside inspections. At a roadside inspection, inspectors may ask to see supporting documents. A supporting document is a document generated or received by a motor carrier in the normal course of business that can be used by law enforcement to verify a driver's logs. These documents can include bills of lading, itineraries, schedules, or equivalent documents that indicate the origin and destination of each trip. They can also include dispatch or trip records, expense receipts related to on-duty/not driving periods, including receipts for meals, lodging, and fuel, electronic mobile communication transmitted through a fleet management system, and payroll records, settlement sheets, or equivalent documents that indicate payment to a driver. Drivers using paper logs must also keep toll receipts. Supporting documents must contain the driver's name, carrier-assigned identification number or vehicle unit number that can be linked to the driver, the date, the name of the nearest city, town, or village, and the time. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. One of the problems when you look at CNN, MSNBC, is all the promises that they made. Looking into the future.
Yeah.
Remember, for example, Michael Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the collage of people saying he's going to be president. Michael Cohen's going to be president. Michael Cohen's going to be president.
Oh, yeah.
Here's probably the next president. This is a guy that's going to get Donald Trump. This is a guy that's going to get Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You look at COVID, the way that every single one. Now we know everybody in the federal government who investigated it, FBI, CIA, you name it, all said, no, most likely source of it was the lab.
It was Avenatti that they said was going to...
Michael Avenatti. Yeah. By the way, not Michael Cohen.
They also built the thing around Cohen. He's going to flip,
Avenatti. Yes.
Yeah, the Trump lawyer. Yeah. They also did that with him, not presidential, but, he's going to flip on Trump. They built that big thing up, and it never happened.
Yep.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Sorry for temporarily mixing up my Michaels there. Avenatti and Cohen. But yeah, if you remember, both CNN and MSNBC over and over, constantly over and over again with Michael Avenatti. He's running for president. Mm-hmm. This is Donald Trump's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
This is and he ends up in jail. He's still in jail now.
Still in jail. We had to check.
And you look at COVID, where they defended everything that was wrong on COVID. Did you see Chris Solis's mea culpa on X?
Mm-mm.
I was wrong.
On COVID?
Yeah. Oh, he's like, basically what he's saying is, but Trump is such a liar, I just assumed he was lying on this, too.
Right. Yeah, okay.
It's like,
All
okay.
right.
Okay, that's a way to try to get out of it, Chris.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
A great journalist you are, right?
Right. Exactly. Didn't do. I just assumed you mean you didn't do your journalism?
Right. I mean, I've never done that. I looked at Biden I didn't just say, did you or I ever get on the air and say, Biden's lying because he lied about something else?
No.
We never did that.
No.
But when you constantly are wrong, and think about the promises over the last couple of years on MSNBC and even CNN. Trump's going to be in jail. 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 Trump will never be president. When you're wrong, think about this. Liberalism to begin with. Everything that they lost on, all the major issues they were wrong on.
Yeah.
Those are all the stances that the liberals on CNN and MSNBC took.
Mm-hmm.
And then every projection of lawfare. Every projection, everything that was wrong in lawfare. Look, they didn't know what to say on The View yesterday when Fetterman was saying, no, the case in New York is basically bogus. It's a political hit job on Trump.
Right.
Well, they didn't scream and yell. They didn't know what to say because he was making sense. But The View, they're always wrong.
Yeah.
The View has to have lawyers on retainer that sit there and monitor their show in real time.
Yep.
So there's not a huge defamation lawsuit against them.
Right.
It's very tough to get incredible, consistent ratings and even sponsors when you're always wrong. And where you're wrong is on issues where you are an extremely out of touch radical.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what's happened. Here's an example. I want to play this one. You and I talked about, Bill Maher.
Yeah.
That, when Bill Maher said, remember, well, Romney and Bush, we called him Hitler and they really weren't, but Trump is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like, shut up. Listen to this one here. The first one goes back to January 26, 2025. It goes back 2 days ago. And the other one goes back to January 21st. 2017. But first we start in 2025 when Bill Maher's talking to his guest and says, that, they were wrong for saying Trump was an illegitimate president.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes back to January 21st of 2017 when he agreed with Keith Olbermann that Trump was an illegitimate president.
Right.
Here it is. Here we go.
It's not like the left doesn't do a version. I mean, they should not have been bitching about Trump is not a legitimate president. He's that was wrong. I agree.
And when John Lewis said he was not a legitimate president,
Yes.
I assume you're on that page.
I am on that page because he's not a legitimate president.
I would agree with that, but he is the president. I mean, it's one of those you have to keep two thoughts in your head at the same time.
What? Either is or isn't. You believe one or the other.
And there's just no consistency.
No, none.
And then they get everything wrong. Let's go to something here just from the last day. This would have been Monday.
Okay.
Jon Stewart.
All right.
With economic sociologist Brooke Harrington.
Okay.
Explains how the tech billionaire broligarchy.
Broligarchy. I like that. Broligarchy.
Yes. And this is from The Daily Show.
Uh-huh.
Keeps the masses in check by sowing division on the internet.
Uh-huh.
You and I listened to this clip and we went, what the hell are they talking about? What world are they in? Did they do a couple of tokes before they went on the air?
Yeah, maybe.
But listen to this. Here we go. All right.
You know what's really kind of surprising to me about this is that what's really needed here is a way for people to coalesce and organize themselves to stand up to these individual accumulations of power in the hands of the broligarchs.
But the law's not on our side. The law is basically now saying corporations are people, money is speech, and so how do you... Well, boy, I hate to see someone who studied this for so long to you go like, you know what's terrible to me? And I'm like, what? No!
Sorry.
You study this.
Well, as you correctly point out, like, where does the wealth actually come from? It comes from labor. So if labor gets together and says, we're not going to stand for this anymore, or if consumers get together and say, we're not going to stand for this anymore, there are way more of us than there are of them. The problem is that the weird twist in the wonderful world of the internet and social media is that rather than giving us a means to coalesce and come together, it's divided us into these little bubbles or camps that are at war with one another.
Which I'm guessing now is maybe the overt strategy.
Yeah.
Because that.
No.
What the hell are they talking about?
I don't know.
I don't even. I mean, they try to sound like they're intellectual. Like this is a sociologist. We're going to get into this.
Mm-hmm.
The hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because you're talking about Elon Musk, community notes. That's bringing people together, trying to find the truth. Is it not?
Yeah. That should be the goal.
That's the goal. Bringing people together.
How is it not everybody's goal?
Well, I don't know what's a more pure thing than try to bring people together by finding out what the truth is before you start the discussion.
Right. Oh, unless the truth doesn't work for your agenda.
And the interesting thing is, has she been paying attention for the last, I don't know, half century at least?
Yeah.
When the number one donors to Democrats have been labor?
Right.
When labor gives like crazy to political candidates,
right.
They make it sound like, well, this might be an idea for people, though, labor to get together and advertise.
Okay.
What?
Seriously.
What are you talking about? And there's no PACs out there that represent different groups and different ideas, are there?
No.
I mean, they sit there, they live in this little bubble, and they don't even recognize what reality is, which is why I wonder whether they're sober or not, because they don't seem to have any standing in actual reality of what is going on out there. See, they're caught up. They're caught up, and the public isn't anymore. The public is sick and tired of the class warfare. They're still throwing out the class warfare. We hit when you were gone a couple Fridays ago is when I just tore apart the oligarchy. Bernie Sanders and then Biden talking about the oligarchy and the tech industrial complex and all this. I said, we tore it apart. It's a bunch of hoo-ha, and the public doesn't care anymore.
Right.
The public doesn't care whether you're a billionaire or not. This is just another way for them to promote class warfare, that if you're rich, you must be doing something wrong. Instead of looking at the person and saying, is what the person doing, is it right? Was Twitter right before to be loaded with FBI agents and in collusion with the FBI to censor ideas they didn't like?
Right.
And was Elon Musk wrong to take it over and then come to the conclusion, look, fact checkers, it's all BS. Let's have community notes. Let's have the public decide. Let's have people come together and be the fact checkers.
Right.
That's somehow exerting power or attempting to sow division? I mean, these people, they're not grounded in reality, Eric.
No,
and
they aren't.
And they wonder why people are ignoring them, and they don't realize people have the masses have said, I'm not going to judge somebody by if they're a billionaire or not, as long as they earn that money legitimately. I'm going to judge them by the substance of their argument that they're making, just like I would anybody else.
Right. Yeah.
And if it's good, not only do I think they should continue on that path, but I'll support them.
Yeah. Right. But this is what you hear in this discussion really is part of the same thought behind the comments by John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. The First Amendment blocks our agenda, John Kerry said.
Yeah.
You just heard
it's a great
Jon
point.
Stewart,
Yep.
The laws work against us. In today's world, corporations are people. Yeah. And money is free speech.
In a fake intelligentsia manure way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, these are...
I couldn't think of any other way to put it.
That's where they live. Because the other option is that you block free speech, that you have it set up. This is, by the way, also further proof of what I was saying, my theory, and I believe I'm right on this, that the left believed that they had won the discussion, but also had conquered the platforms where all the discussions were being had, that being social media. They thought they were going to control social media forever. Oh, my gosh. What is scarier than the FBI setting up a sub-headquarter office at then Twitter and basically dictating what they're going to allow to be seen? The same thing now we know at Facebook. The government controlling what people see.
Wow. The majority of the comments, because this was a daily show, blasting them.
Yeah. Good. And they'll never get it.
First comment. This is how suppression of free speech starts.
Yep. This is it.
These bubbles have always existed. The internet has simply mapped them. Labor is not a people. It is the energy to complete a task. It is fungible and malleable. Stop living in a slave mentality that requires the masters to grant you snacks. I don't know if they mean the broligarchy or Jon Stewart there.
Yeah.
Where is it here? Because the division is already there. The tech billionaires didn't create it. Their social medias do facilitate the expression of conflict by bringing conflict-seeking people together. But that's what free speech is about.
Yeah.
Somebody writes, the show used to be smart and funny. Now it's neither.
Well, that wasn't a smart conversation.
No, it wasn't.
At all. The essence of that conversation really was, how do we get back to controlling free speech?
Yeah, that's what it is. And trying to sound intellectual in doing it.
Exactly. But you do it in this pop culture setting. Yeah.
This is what Jamie Raskin's trying to do.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of yelling, let's try to talk in an intellectual way.
Exactly.
To take away people's rights and take away free speech and have the government censor. If we talk about it in a nicer way, over a cup of coffee, this may work. That's why we need these argument psychologists for Democrats.
We'll start something, in fact, every Saturday morning. Coffee with a communist.
Where am I going to go? Coffee with a cop or coffee with a communist? I think I'll go to the cop.
I think so.
866-90-RED-I.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-I on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. Our podcast starts right after our show is over. Our show is over at 5 a.m. Central Time, 6 a.m. Eastern Time. And so a few minutes after that, our podcast starts in case you haven't been able to listen to all 5 hours. And if during the show you can't get us on one of our great radio stations, you can get us on our app because we stream live all 5 hours.
Yep.
And coming up following the top of the hour, some classic hits with Jim Costo.
Oh, you're going to want to hear this. If you haven't heard this. Not a lot of people play the long version because in the media, in the liberal activist media, there was only a short part of it. So I think a lot of people...
What part are you talking about?
The exchange between Trump and Acosta.
Oh, I know that, but what were they talking about?
Well, what do you mean, what were they talking about?
Because this doesn't have, the cut I was going to play doesn't have it where he's talking about immigration.
No, that's what I mean.
Okay.
What you're going to hear isn't the normal back and forth, the very short clip of what the media played. They left out a big portion of it. That's actually what I was saying.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.